My name is Anna Astwood. I'm the co-founder of Love Doesn't Hurt, and you can find us on lovedoesn'thurtinc.org. And we are a nonprofit that works to end teenage dating violence. We go into schools and educate and empower students about teen dating violence, how to prevent it, how to get out of it if they are in it. I've been doing that. I started about 4 years ago. Um, I was a former high school counselor. I did that for about 11 years. I really enjoy working with teens. And I also have a small business. It's called Grace's Love Designs. And I create guided journals for people to process trauma, to process grief, things like that. And I myself am a survivor of being sexually assaulted at the age of 12 while in school. Um, and then unfortunately in high school, I did get into a dating relationship that was very physically violent and emotionally abusive as well. So that's kind of my background and kind of guided me to what I'm doing today, the nonprofit.
Well, thank you first and foremost for sharing. I know in my research and in my anecdotal experiences, and some of the men and women that I work with, they also share that a lot of their sexual trauma does happen within school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that is because maybe the children or the people, while they're growing up and their bodies are changing and there's hormones and there's puberty, there isn't an outlet for them to express themselves in a healthy way. As a counselor now, did you see maybe that being a factor when you had these incidences within the school where education would have been helpful for those who needed it versus those who were just maybe who had the bad behaviors, they needed guidance in another way?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a high school counselor, it was constant. Um, Issues with students doing inappropriate things, touching other students inappropriately, happened in class, which is, it's wild to think about that, but it is happening in class, in the hallways. Um, yeah, I think it would have been extremely helpful to have some more education that we can talk about this. It is a very uncomfortable discussion to have. But I think as the adults, that's our job, is to have those uncomfortable conversations because it's going to help these teens. And also kind of allowing those who have been victims to come forward in an environment that feels safe, right? If no one ever talks about it, well, certainly I'm not going to be the one to go talk about it when I'm 13, 14 years old, right? So yeah, I couldn't tell you how many over 11 years, just a lot of cases of sexual assault while in school happening that would, and that was just what was reported to me, right? How many more were not reported?
Yes, I've if I look back on my high school, I wasn't aware of it in elementary school, which like grade 8 and younger, so that's what like 13 and younger. But once I got to like the high school level, like 14, like let's say age 14 to 18, that's where I became aware of it because people would share, and some of the stories that they would tell me, it sounded horrifying, at least hearing it. But the way that it was told to me, I was more bothered by it than the person who was sharing it, or the maybe the group of people that were discussing it. Do you find sometimes that there seems to be like a minimizing of the impact that the victim is going through, and the people who are listening, they're like, oh my god, I can't believe you went through that, where they're like, yeah, it was kind of bad, but you know it just is what it is.
Yes, on both sides. Yes, I think there's minimizing on the side of the person who did it. And it was okay. I barely touched this person or whatnot. Um, and then even on the victim side, I think there is minimizing of, it's okay, this thing's happen. And I don't want to tell anybody. That happens very often. And it very much bothers me, both sides. But when I go into the schools, something that I do tell them about my own experience. And something that I always say to them is, if you hear nothing else today than what I say, please hear this. keep your hands to yourself. Keep them to yourself, because that moment that you have decided to touch somebody else without their permission then changes that person's life forever. And you may move on without a second thought, right? I am 42 years old. I remember that moment like it was yesterday. So I'm trying to get them to understand the impact that they have on other people in a split second decision, possibly, they may not plan it. But that really changes someone's life. And so yeah, I see people just saying, oh, it's not a big deal, this and that, but it is a big deal. You don't have to be touched if you don't want to be touched.
Yeah, and I always found, because I haven't experienced it myself, but it's been shared to me. And when I ask the person or the people that I've shared it, that's exactly what they do. They minimize it. And sometimes I look at it as, then you catch yourself, right? Like, okay, I'm feeling this, but if they don't feel this, is it really not a big deal? Like now you're beginning to question
Yes,
your
right,
own sanity, right? Because they're like, well, at least in my experience, it came across as it's something that just happens. Whereas me, because I'm not exposed to that and it's something that I haven't done, it's like, no, it isn't something. Yeah, it does happen. Like crime does happen. Like bad things does happen, right? But it's not something that should be like, okay, I was sexually abused. What's for dinner tomorrow? Like, right?
right, right.
Right. So when you went through what you went through at such a young age, you mentioned 12. Like, how did you process what was going on at that time, and how do you process it now in hindsight?
So I think at the time I didn't process. I mean, I just shock, to be perfectly honest. It was between classes, and I was in seventh grade. So it happened, and I can remember the feeling that I got from my stomach, just a flush of emotion of like, what just happened? Why did he do that? And I didn't know what else to do, so I walked to my science class and I sat down and I sat there and I didn't do anything. I don't think I processed it. It felt so wrong and bad. I was way too scared to ever go and tell somebody. Um, I don't know if it was because I thought they wouldn't believe me or if it wasn't a big deal and I was overreacting, that kind of thing. Or I just didn't know what to do. Um, I will say I never, ever verbally said I was sexually assaulted until I was 37 years old. So I spent 25 years just holding that and not processing it at all until I remember there was a Supreme Court judge that had a hearing, and he had someone saying that he sexually assaulted her. And I remember people talking about her and saying she has to be lying because no one keeps a secret that long. No one could keep a secret like that for 25, 30 years. And I remember sitting there thinking, they can, because I am. And that actually was what helped get me into a counselor's office. I couldn't verbalize it to my husband. I had never told anybody, and she was the first person I told. Um, and so that took a long time for me to process through that. A lot of different therapies to help me process through that experience. Um, and I will say it's difficult, but it's much better than my reactions were before. But I think as survivors, we also have to realize that as we age, like I have a 13-year-old daughter. Um, the age of 12 for me was very hard for her when she turned 12, right? It was very triggering for me. I just kept thinking, please let me get her to 13 without someone touching her, right? Those are hard things to process through. Um, but you put in the work, and that's what I do. And every time I go into the counselor's office, we put in the work to help process these things and work through them, that it wasn't my fault. I did not cause it to happen. Um, it should never have happened. Those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, as a child, I didn't process it. I didn't know what to do. So as an adult, I've done that work, which is I continue to do that work every single day.
There's two people I spoke to. One was assaulted when they were a child by a family member, and another one was assaulted later on in their adulthood at a work event. No, sorry, at a school event, but it was like university, so they're in their adulthood.
Okay.
And in both situations, when the person who was younger, when she grew up, she did something that the person in their adulthood did, and that they're apologizing to the perpetrator. They felt that it was their fault, and they're like, "I'm sorry this happened," and things like that. And they explained the state of mind, and they thought that they contributed to it somehow. They thought that they brought it upon themselves. Like, why would that happen to me? Is it because I did this? Is it because I did that? And it's interesting to see how, in some cases, when you're a victim of something, if you want to activate like your defense mechanism, you automatically say, okay, it's not that person's fault, it's my fault. And if I identify it as my fault, then I can do something about it because it's now my responsibility. Versus if Anna, you did something to me and I want it resolved, I need your participation in it. So it might be harder. What are some of the emotions that you experienced? Was there like some blame, some shame? Like, take us through what you were experiencing as you're looking back now because you were quite young going through it.
Yeah, there was definite an immediate shame, um, just uncomfortable feeling, confusion. There was absolute anger because I didn't understand why he would do that to me. What I a lot of for a long time, what did I do to cause that? Was something that ran through my mind because I did think that must have played a part in that. Um, I should have left it was in the locker area of in the downstairs area of our school. And I thought I shouldn't have been the last one to leave because I was the last one of the friend group. So everyone else had left and I hadn't left yet. And I thought if I had just left, I stayed alone. I shouldn't have been alone. So yeah, there was I actually had this conversation this week about forgiveness. And I've had to do a lot of work of forgiving myself in that situation, how I responded in that situation, and that releasing myself from the responsibility that I thought I had. Um, yeah, I mean, probably every emotion you can think of, I have felt about that moment. Um, a lot of anger towards him that he can live a life. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what life he's living, but there is an anger sometimes of I now hold this, right? It's part of me. It's not all of me. It's part of my story. Is it part of his? Does he remember? Does he get to forget? Because I don't. And so there is some anger there that, hey, you've changed my life. And so, yeah, I think you can probably say I've had a lot of different emotions and some still come up.
What are some of the things that you see that are commonalities in people that experience this type of trauma?
I think a lot of us feel shame. I think a lot of us feel shame. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is why we stay silent for so long. I think we feel a responsibility. I know that I specifically had a belief that I was bad, like very specific that I was bad, that situation proved I was not a good person. And I don't know if everybody else has that, but I know shame and that response, like I must have done something to cause it, when in fact that is the opposite, and you never caused it, and you're not a bad person. You didn't deserve that to happen to you. Um, those are the things that kind of help me now. But I think shame is something that is just extremely, extremely powerful, and can be debilitating.
Well, it's a feeling, and you also feel like powerless because someone has taken something from you that, in a lot of ways, are still very intimate and very sacred. And you mentioned your daughter, when she was approaching that age, you began to get feel triggered, and you're going through some of the emotions that maybe you experienced back then. Did you ever have the conversation with your daughter in an effort to maybe not only prepare herself but to help you along, because now you're in a way reliving what you went through?
Yes, yes. Our my children, in a very age appropriate way, we discuss things about people have the right to put their hands on you. You know, we've had those discussions since they were little in an appropriate, age developmental way. Um, I did have a discussion with my daughter. I took her out to lunch one day, and I kind of they know what I do for a living. They know that I do a nonprofit. They're aware, but she wasn't specifically aware. And in a very appropriate way, I did talk to her about it, because she needs to know, right? Nobody wants to have a conversation with a 12-year-old child about being sexually assaulted, because our brains think that's crazy. I don't want to, they're children, right? Nobody wants to have that. But very unfortunately, children are being assaulted even at younger ages. So, yes, it's a terrible thing, but I would rather equip her with empower her and let her know that if anything does ever happen, it is not your fault. You can yell and scream, you can hit, you can run. You can also stay silent if that's your choice. You can freeze if that's how what your body needs to do. Um, but that you have a safe place here with me. And at the end of the day, that's what I wanted her to know, that you always have a safe place to come with me, that you can tell me and I can help you. I'm here to help guide you through whatever life throws at us. And so, yeah, we did have that conversation. And I was very proactive with my own, therapies, and making sure that I checked in with myself and did those things that were important, because I didn't want to lay my traumas onto her. So yeah, it was very hard, to be honest. It was tough. It was tough. So we got through it. So
Oh yeah, like I don't think that's on anyone's bingo card,
no,
that
it,
conversation.
no.
I spoke to a survivor, and she works with men and women who are overcoming it.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that she shared in our my conversation with her was there are times where we don't know that we're being assaulted until years later. Because there's some people that are engaging in consensual activity, right? And then something happens. There's a change maybe in what's going on, or just a change in the dynamic. And now you're uncomfortable, but you're thinking, I love this person.
Mm-hmm.
This is my forever partner. This is my whatever it is you want to call them. And then what happens is you become more and more uncomfortable with their sexual demands, sexual requests. And I know that you work with a not for profit organization. When you're speaking to people, do you see that form of the assault where it's two people who are in a relationship together, but they're not necessarily okay with what is happening?
I have not had a student disclose that while in the nonprofit. I have had that when I was a school counselor. I have had students come to me who were in a consensual dating relationship, but very uncomfortable with where things were heading, uncomfortable with requests for pictures, right? That's so common now, and it's terrifying. But yes, that does happen. I know for me that did happen. That was almost exactly in high school. It just got, um, I didn't like it. I didn't like it, but I didn't know what to do, right? You're in this weird, you're a kid. It's so difficult. And sometimes we kind of go along with it, not realizing it. This is abuse. Like, this is not okay. But we don't know it for a very, very long time afterward.
I think that's the part that's scary, because as children, even as adults, we're not fully equipped, right? But as children, it's tough, and they're more likely to give into the peer pressure. Come on, just send me a picture of this, send me a picture of that. It's like now there's so many, it's become, I think, commonplace. Like I hear from my friends, male and female, that they're exchanging pictures of body parts like it's nothing.
Mhm, mhm.
And
It's extraordinarily, I will use the word common. A lot of kids would say, "Oh, everyone does it," and I was like, "Okay, just because everyone does it does not mean it is appropriate and okay and healthy. Period." Right? They like to use that everyone's doing it, but it is happening a lot, and unfortunately, a lot of times when people think it's going to be, just sent to one person, it is then sent out or posted online, and I mean that destroys somebody. That is humiliating and such a violation. It's very difficult for them to come back from that when it's just been spread out on, social media and stuff. So yeah, I'm very happy. I'm old lady, and we didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have any of that. We barely had beepers. We had beepers, so, but I keep a close eye on phones. If I were, I mean, I am a teen. My daughter has a phone. There's a lot of stuff that I'm in charge of the phone, um, and I monitor it just because kids send things and do things that they shouldn't. And I think we need to be very aware of that. You're a parent of a teen.
yeah, you don't want to be, I guess you need to find that balance. You don't become like what they call it, the helicopter parents,
Hmm.
where you're just circling everything that they do. But you have to be protective in a sense that it is so dangerous. I couldn't imagine, like, I find the courage because I don't normally do it, right? I find the courage to send like a racy picture, an explicit picture of myself, and then things end and that ends up on the internet. Like, how do you recover from that, right? Like you're like you're that guy,
Right,
you're that girl,
right, right,
right? And you
right. But
see you see people like who experience, let's say, who self delete, who unalive themselves, who commit suicide because of these things, because the
yep.
pressure is so overwhelming. And I wouldn't want to, because you and I are like relatively around the same age. Like when we're in school, the person who was, let's say, promiscuous or who was known to be, you knew essentially who they were, right? Like they could be identified. Now we identify people in a different way, like, oh my god, that's Anna, she sent these pictures to Terrain, you want to see them, and then you can just literally log in somewhere and see it, and that carries forward from the age of 12, the age of 16, the age
Hmm.
of 20, the age of 25. I remember speaking to a teacher, and she teaches, I think, grade 5 or 6, which is like what, you're like 11, around that age,
Yeah.
right? And she was telling me that people in her class are sexually active. I was like, how? Like it literally blew my mind. Like, are you surprised of how sexually active or at least sexually engaged the younger generation is, which opens themselves up to these potential dangers?
I have to be honest, when being a school counselor for high school kids, the things that they've told me, I'm not surprised that it's happening younger, because when I worked with students who were from 14 to 18, the things that they would tell me horrified me. The things that they were doing was just terrible. So it doesn't surprise me that it's younger and younger. And I think the access to information that they should not have on the internet is a problem. Um, and kids showing each other things back and forth, and having a phone, having the internet in their hand isn't helpful either. So yeah, I'm not surprised, because I would come home from work and tell my husband, like, the things I heard today, I couldn't even imagine an adult telling me, let alone, a 14-year-old child telling me these things that they're doing. And they're just so freely telling me as well. They don't care. They're not embarrassed. They're just letting me know. And I was like, I don't want to know. Don't, don't tell. I don't want to know anymore. So yeah, it's very scary. Yeah.
What is something that the parents can do to help protect their children, or at least maybe raise awareness so they can protect themselves when the parents aren't around?
I would just, I would say monitor what they're doing, you know, online or in whatnot. But I think also having just an open communication with your child. Um, and letting them know that we're here to talk and we're here to have discussions, kind of be proactive, but age appropriate discussions with your child, um, is important. Um, I bought a book for both my daughters. We'd read it together about their bodies and what their bodies do, and everyone's different. And I think just opening that door to have those conversations, not making everything a secret, kind of helps them feel more comfortable to come talk to you about things. And I think that has helped. But just, you don't want to be a helicopter parent, but you kind of have to, you gotta be on it at the same time. And where are your kids? Who are they with? Who's at their friend's house? Those kind of things, like we need to know those things, and just kind of going back to that, where are you at? And are those parents home? And those kind of things like that.
I also think to piggyback of what you said, I think that if we teach our children or ourselves saying that we don't have to go along to get along, me and what I mean by that is sometimes we know that the group of friends that we're trying to be friends with, or the group or the circle of friends that we're trying to break into, they're not the best of people. And then when we're around them, they may put us in difficult situations. Like you've probably, like, through what your work that you do, I'm sure that you've heard examples where people have gone here and something has happened, or they've gone there and something happened, or they're around this person and something has happened. And this is not to say that 100% of the time it's because a person put themselves in a difficult situation, but I know, right, some people have shared with me saying that if I made better choices and if I was more aware in educating myself, maybe some of the trauma that I experienced would not have happened. I know you mentioned education earlier. Do you think that maybe better awareness and being able to read people better could have helped some people as well?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I think we need to do a better job at educating and having conversations with our own children about these things, for boys and girls, making sure they understand that they need to ask permission before they touch someone else's body, even if they are in a relationship with them. You don't have the right to do that. Um, you are allowed to leave situations that you may go somewhere and you find out, I don't like this, but everyone else is having a great time. Text me. I will come and pick you up. You don't have to stay there. Um, giving them, like, empowering them to say, I don't want to do this, right? Even if their friends are, they can find a way out. Like, oh, my mom said I had to come home. Whatever, blame it on me, right? But if you are uncomfortable in a situation, you don't have to stay there, right? And if something bad happens, even if you made a bad decision to go to a party and something bad happens, it still isn't your fault that that happened, right? Um, Now we know maybe what can we do next time if you go to a party? What can we do differently that you make you feel safe and keep you safer? And so I actually do help parents create safety plans for their teens, just in general. Like, what are some things that we can work on to create a safety plan? We can't prevent everything, but we can try to make things as safe as we possibly
What are then some of the commonalities you find that are part of that plan and maybe some of the issues that it identifies?
can. Having someone know where you are. So parents clearly need to know where their children are, right? Or a friend knowing where you are. But also, what I have found, it's been super interesting, is kids are sharing their location with their dating partner and also their friends as well, but their dating partner. I find that to be extremely dangerous. I will never let my kids, share their location with a dating partner, and really even their friends. No one really needs to know where you are at all times. I find that to be unnecessary. The parents need to know where they are. I know for me in high school, my boyfriend, in high school would always knew where I was. We didn't even have cell phones. He could find me. I can't imagine what it would be like if we did have, cell phones. It, so, letting your parents, your friends know where you are. Um, I would, think, especially with older kids, don't drink anything that you didn't pour yourself. Um, don't go somewhere alone. Don't walk to your car alone. Things like that that just we can control, because you can't control everything, but there are certain things that we can control. Texting when you get somewhere, texting when you're driving home, things like that, that just simple things that we kind of forget to do, but could make a big impact.
I've seen that. Well, it seems like a trend to me. I've seen that online where people tag exactly where they are while they're still there.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to, like, some, like, part of me, I kind of make fun of it. So let's say, for example, if I went to Los Angeles, but I was there like a week ago, I'll post a picture of me there like a week ago with my location, right? But I've seen people who are there, and I've heard, like, at least on the news, like some people have ended up in some serious trouble because they were actually there the time that they posted it. And I've always wondered, from a safety perspective, why would you want so many people that you don't really know to know your location online? Because that's actually where they're sharing. It's not like they're texting Anna, hey, I'm at the Starbucks down the street,
Right.
right? They're saying, hey, everybody,
I'm
I'm
here.
here.
I honestly, I don't know. I've never, I don't know. I don't know if it's just like, hey, just want to put it out there. I'm here. Um, are they inviting people to come meet them? What, and I don't, they're young, and sometimes I don't think they can think that far ahead, that there could be someone watching this that isn't there to be my friend. And sometimes a lot of people think these bad things aren't going to happen to me. Um, and bad things can happen to you. And so I think you have to take precautions, like appropriate precautions. Do not let everyone know that you're not in your house right now, right? Because people could know where you live. So if she's not in our house, I could go into her house and wait for her to come home. So I think it's a very dangerous thing to do personally. And I think they do it very willingly and openly. And again, they were like, "This is asked, but it's so normal. Everyone does it." And I was like, that doesn't mean anything to me. Just because everyone does it doesn't mean it's a healthy thing to do. I always try to get them to take the location sharing off from their friends, but they usually don't comply.
No, please do. I saw a post where she wrote home alone and she tagged her location.
No, nope.
I'm like wondering, and what's interesting, she was dressed in a way that was like, okay, what are you saying?
Mhm. Right,
Really,
right.
right? It's like, if I sit there like my underwear, I'm home alone. What am I trying to convey, right? So it's always interesting when I see people post those things. I'm like, okay, are you saying you're home alone because you want someone to come over, or are you just posting it to post it? So I always try to understand the state of mind, right? Because if I'm home by myself, I'm just home by myself. Like, I'm not
Right.
thinking of letting everyone know, but I'm with you on that one. I'm always trying to understand the mindset. Okay, you're saying you're home alone, like, why?
Yeah, there's clearly more to that. There's a reason behind doing something like that. What is the reason behind someone having to put that out there, that I'm home alone? That to me is like the worst thing you can do. I can't even imagine ever doing that. That's like my fear. I don't want anyone to know I'm home alone. So putting that out there to me like wonders, what's going on there, what's happening, what was the reason behind that? Why did we do that? That would be my question to them. And again, I
Yeah,
think that goes back to, we need to have conversations with people. Right? I hope someone in her or his world said, "Can you tell me what that was about? Why did you do that?" I hope someone does that, and has a conversation, because it seems like they may need to have a conversation about that, needing to let people know where they are and that they're home alone. It's an odd thing to do. So I think that, yeah, that's my hope. I hope someone with a good heart asked, "Why did you do that?"
yeah. I hope someone will go to them and say, "Was your intention?" And it could be something as innocent. You know what? I'm just home bored. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I 100% with you. It's like, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for daddy. But I understand social media is used in a lot of ways for attention and validation, but I would hope as you mentioned, through education, right? That people realize that you could be potentially putting yourself in difficult situations because you can't control who sees that.
Right. Yeah. You don't know who's seeing
Right.
that. And then also just take a second and just think about, do I need to post that? Why am I posting that? And I know that that's hard for teenage kids to take a second and do that. Um, and again, I think that's just our job to teach them how to do things like that because they're kids, they're impulsive, but sometimes those impulsive things may get them in a situation that they might not want to be. And so I do feel responsible or a responsibility to help the kids that I meet with and help educate them about things to keep them safe.
Take us through your not for profit. How did that get started and how dear to your heart is that?
uh, Love Doesn't Hurt is everything to me, to be honest. It started because I was a counselor for 11 years, right? And I was also a survivor of teen dating violence. And I knew working in the schools that we were not talking about dating violence. It was not something, there was no in services, there was no education about it. And after I stopped working in the schools, I just kind of had time to really think about what do I want to do with my life, right? I went to be a school counselor because I wanted to help teens. That was my desire. I didn't feel like I was doing enough as a school counselor. My days were not filled with teens. It was mostly filled with angry parents and emails and schedule changes, right? And I was like, I'm just not making the impact that I feel like my heart needs to make. And so I was home and I was starting my therapy, and I think it was about 2 years after I stopped working full time. Um, I looked at my husband. I was like, "This is crazy, but I think I want to start a nonprofit." And he was like, "Uh huh." I go, "Yeah, I think I want to start a nonprofit about dating violence, and I can go into the schools and I can educate them and I can do programs." And he was like, "You don't know anything about nonprofits," which I didn't. And I was like, "I know, but I think I can figure it out." Uh, so I did. I went to the library and I checked out like 9 books on how to start nonprofits. I read them. I did talk to some people who started nonprofits, and I had a dear friend who's the co-founder of mine with me. We just started working on it, and we've just been figuring it out. Um, Love Doesn't Hurt is exactly what it says. Love doesn't hurt, right? Love does not hurt. And it's important, I think, that we know that we educate people that it's not supposed to hurt us. It can disappoint us sometimes, right? We get into arguments or whatnot but love doesn't hurt. And I felt like I had the ability to speak on it because I've experienced it, and I had the knowledge of working in a school of that there's an area that we are not covering. And these are going to become adults who then could go into more abusive relationship as they get older. So I love it. I love what I do. I think it's important. Um, yeah, it means a whole lot to me.
How can we find love that doesn't hurt?
I think we have to establish like what we want, what we're comfortable with, what are our boundaries, who are we, what kind of person do we want to be with? And that's a very challenging thing, I think, for everybody, right? Even adults have a hard time doing that. What I think is important is that when we start dating and we come across those moments where we feel uncomfortable and we're like, I don't like that, right? Everyone has those moments where you just feel like, ooh, nope, I didn't like that. Those are the moments when we need to set a boundary, right? We need to express, verbally say how we feel and see how that person responds to it. If that person says, no, I'm going to keep doing this, that is your sign. You need to move on, right? If they accept your boundary and you guys can work it out, that's wonderful. But we have to allow or teach students that someone to cross boundaries, someone to physically hurt you, someone that puts you down, someone that makes fun of you, someone that tells you to stop hanging out with your friends, that is not a healthy person. And you do not have to stay in a relationship with them. That is so important that you don't have to stay there. So it's a lot of, I think, a lot of education on that, and a lot of that's why part of our mission statement is that we educate and we empower students use their own voice to say what they want, not what the other person wants. So.
I love that you mentioned that because that took me back to a relationship that I had where I stayed in it thinking that I had to.
Mhm.
I was like, Terrain, you can overcome this. You can work through this. And then I realized, I was like, no,
Mhm.
love should be fulfilling.
Mhm.
You fight for your love, but it shouldn't be a question of you're always fighting,
Yes.
right? If that makes any sense. So when I see someone who's in a relationship and I see someone who's being abused, let's say sexually, and they're like, well, it's okay. I can get through it. And I look at some of the men and women who've said that. Like it goes back to earlier point, right? Where the person who's listening to this is more bothered than the person who's saying it.
Yeah.
Some people they just push it to the side. And sometimes I think, is it because this is the devil that they know? Right? This is happening. Okay, I know this person is doing this, versus if I go over here, is this
Mhm.
person going to accept me with this abuse? Like I went on and I raised that because I went on a couple of years ago, many years ago, sorry, I went on a date with someone who was sexually abused. And when she told me, she felt shame, as you mentioned. And I had a conversation. I was very open. I was like, no, we can continue. Thank you for sharing. But she was hesitant to share because I'm guessing from a prior experience, when she mentions it, the people kind of go the other way. They don't want to really deal with someone that is a survivor of something like that. And I wonder if that's maybe one of the reasons why people keep it to themselves, because there's the fear of judgment. Am I right? Am I damaged goods? Oh my God, like they don't want to deal with me. Like when you're working with your clients and through your organization, do you see some people being hesitant to share because they ultimately want another relationship and they think is going to negatively impact it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There is a fear of, because if you've been assaulted, I'm not going to say everybody, but I think a lot of us think we caused it, we're bad, you know. So if we tell people about it, then they're going to think, oh my gosh, like, they're a bad person, they caused it, what did they do, just there's a negative connotation around it, obviously. And so it's, yeah, you don't want to talk about it. It's extremely difficult to tell that to a partner, or a new partner. I know, my husband and I, he was aware of the dating violence when we started dating. He was not aware of the sexual assault because I didn't tell anybody until I was 37. But he had to learn what triggered me, because I still get triggered by things. And so he had to learn, um, what those things were, and kind of identify them and help me through the emotions when that happened. I did, I can say for myself, I even would say to him, is this too much for you? Is it dealing with all of my things? Is this going to be too much? Um, and of course he's like, no, of course not. And we have really worked through a lot of things together because we're both willing to do that. I think that's really part of the thing that makes, relationship work too, is you're both willing to work on things together. But yeah, there is an absolute shame and fear of being judged, that you may not want to share with a new partner. Yeah.
Yeah, and that I think that's the part that's really tough, because if it happens younger in your
Hmm.
life, which it usually does, then you have the potential of it coming up in your future relationships. And if you are fearing the judgment, then you go to hold it. And one of the scariest things that I think that could ever happen as a man, because more women are assaulted than men, in general, even though the numbers are unfortunately getting closer, is the fact that if I'm with someone and I don't know that they've been assaulted and I do something that triggers them,
Yeah.
right? You have that dynamic as well. Like how would you counsel that situation for both
So
parties?
for both parties, I mean, the person who didn't know, I mean, for someone, I understand being triggered. Being someone who does something isn't negative, right? They didn't do anything wrong. It's just for whatever reason that was a trigger for me, right? And so I think you kind of need to express that hey, that's a trigger for me. I know that you didn't do anything wrong necessarily, but for me, that brings me back, and this is why. And I think just again having that conversation about that um, is important. But and you want to make sure that um, the partner doesn't feel to blame, right? That they did something wrong when they did not. It was just it's a trigger. It happens all the time. It could be a smell. It could be a clip on a movie. It could be someone says something. It could be anything, right? And you're taken the survivor is taken right back, right? And it can be difficult, but I think once you get to know them, it gets easier.
So, and as we close, what advice do you want to give to those who've survived assault and they want to continue forward in their life?
Um, that healing can happen. Um, that there is hope and there is joy and there is love. Um, that healing is not going to be a linear process. You take one step forward and like five back sometimes, and that is okay and that is normal. I am a big believer in that don't overcome our trauma. We learn to walk with it and we hold a healthy space for it, right? Because it is part of us now. It's not all of us, but it's part of us. And I think, sometimes when I started the nonprofit, I thought I did it. I I'm healed. I started a nonprofit. I've overcome it. And I was quickly reminded that I was not, right? That I'm on this journey. It's a continual journey that I will be on forever, but a journey that is filled with joy, peace, and happiness because I put in a lot of work to heal. So you can heal, you can have love, you can have joy and peace in your life.